All right, looks like we're going. Again, my name is Alex Clarkson, Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning here in Sylvania Schools, and tonight we'll be talking about the computer program, excuse me, I already tripped over my words, the computer programming programs at Southview and Northview High Schools. We have the opportunity now, developed over the last handful of years, to present two full programs of computer programming, each with its own distinctive flavor and focus at our two high schools. Just a quick note before we move on, keep in mind that even though a program is housed at Northview or housed at Southview, they are open to both Southview and Northview students. And what I'd like you to do in considering our programs tonight is to consider the differences among them. Both are amazing opportunities for students to learn computer programming and enter into a world that is exciting, creative, and in many cases lucrative, and will definitely put students into a career field that is hiring. So it's an excellent opportunity right now, and we're proud that we do have two full programs. But listen to Mr. Ward and Mr. Jones about what they offer that is a little bit different, because I guarantee that you will get a unique experience out of each of those programs. We'll take one program in turn. And Mr. Jones has been polite enough to nominate Mr. Word to go first. So John Word here is former Spanish teacher at Northview High School and current computer programming teacher. One of the most amazing minds that I've worked with in Sylvania Schools behind the scenes on a number of tech-associated projects. So I can't speak highly enough of Mr. Word and his capabilities. I'll turn things over to him. John, do you have a presentation you'd like to share tonight?
Yes, I do. So okay. I'll go ahead and start presenting that.
Great, then I will fade into the background.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for organizing this, and for all the parents and students. I even have two of my current students that are in here right now. So thank you all for being here. Alex, I really appreciate that introduction too. So I'm going to go ahead and get this presenting. Okay. So the program at Northview is a little bit different than the program at Southview. So when Mr. Jones speaks, then you'll hear some of those differences. But we obviously both focus on the skills of programming, and we offer comparable introduction classes, and then our first year in the program is somewhat comparable, but then that's kind of where we branch off from there. So I'll talk about the courses that then at Northview we'd offer to freshmen and sophomores. It's also open to upperclassmen as well, but it's geared more toward the freshman and sophomore years. So we have Introduction to Computer Programming, and both of these are one semester classes, so each of them would earn a half a credit. So with Introduction to Computer Programming, it's really all about diving into actually typing computer code, and the language that we work with primarily is JavaScript. So if anybody out there is actually familiar with what the different programming languages are, that's the one that we focus on in that class. But it's about taking the first baby steps into writing computer code. And that's compared with the 2D game design class, which is offered by another teacher as well in Northview. And I'll leave it to Mr. Jones to say whether it's at Southview or not. I don't fully remember. But the 2D game design class is where we use a piece of software called Game Salad that is a game engine. So it's in order with something like Unity or Unreal. Now, not to the same level as those are, if you happen to know what those programs are. But it's a very nice piece of software that allows students to make video games in a very convenient way, and it has tutorials built into it. So it's a very good way to get started with coding and programming and computational thinking is like a very first step. Now, I know many of the middle schools have experiences that relate to coding, and they're getting into that. So I think 2D game design is a pretty good bridge then from some of the computational activities that they do in the middle schools to getting into something that looks a little bit more like programming. It's a tile-based system where students would take different elements, so maybe a character, and they would drag it onto a scene. And then they would take something like an action, like move or jump, and they would drag it onto the character. So it's very much built around the graphic interface system as opposed to typing out code. So that's kind of the big difference then in introduction to computer programming at Northview. Now, obviously, in both of these courses, in intro, we do a lot of building video games as well, obviously with 2D game design. Because the graphical side of that makes it very engaging for students. I mean, I'm sure most of the students that you're thinking of right now are maybe playing video games right now. They're very that's something that they're very excited about, and they understand deeply. They know some of the terminology in game design that's important to know. So we do the same kind of idea in intro to computer programming too, and because it's intro, we build some classic games that are fairly simple. So Pong and Space Invaders, and sometimes we mix in Flappy Bird and just different very simple games. And right now, that's the course that I'm teaching. They are working on making their final project, where they take some of the concepts we did during the semester, and then they build their own little game or little app or whatever it is, with JavaScript being at the center of it. So they really are typing out the code to make those different games come alive. So that's kind of where the process would start. They would sign up for these elective classes. They're not technically requirements for then the upper level classes. I definitely do suggest it though. So the upper level classes that I'll talk about, we don't actually have prerequisites for those, but I heavily suggest at least taking 2D game design, if not also taking intro to programming. It's very valuable. The students that have taken intro to programming and they've written some computer code and they've done debugging, that helps them then in the upper level courses. So talking about the upper level courses then, typically in the junior and senior years, that's when they're able to take these courses. I mean, almost always that's the design of it. So as sophomores then at the end of their sophomore year, they would be signing up for these classes. So the specific names of the classes are AP Computer Science, Systems Analysis and Design, Web Development, and then Database Administration. So in the junior year, the focus is on the Java programming language, and that is connected with the AP Computer Science class, which is also part of the Southview program. There's just a little difference in the exact sequence of it, but we both start off talking about the Java language, and kind of the big connection there is with it being with the AP Computer Science exam. So then we're preparing students to be able to take that exam and to do well on it. But I've found Java to be a really good language for beginners, even if it's not their very first language, for students who are beginners into writing real higher level code. That's a good way for them to really get big understandings in what they're doing. And then that carries over into the senior year. So the big difference between the Northview and Southview program is what the senior year looks like. So at Northview, we focus on web development and database administration. So we kind of come back to the languages that we started up in intro with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And those are the three languages that the internet is built on. So almost every single web page that you've looked at is built with HTML and CSS. So those are the skills that we talk about and that we learn and that we practice. And by the end of then that senior year, students are making a full-fledged web application, which is similar to a mobile application that you would have on your phone. The big difference is that it works in a browser. So it's think of any of the social media apps that people use. If you have the Facebook app, well, there's a Facebook.com. You have TikTok, where there's a TikTok.com. You have Spotify, there's a Spotify.com. So our site explores then developing that web application that also connects to databases, which is, every time you upload, some picture onto Facebook, it's got to get stored in a database somewhere. And that network that explains who people's friends are and how many things you liked and what video the algorithm recommends to you, that all comes from the database. And so those are the skills that we teach. So along with that, each of these classes that are in the upper level are at least an honors level course. And then the AP Computer Science class is an AP class. So with that being said, students do gain a few extra GPA points, and it raises up the GPA a little bit, which is a nice benefit for the students, I think. And there are college credits offered in the various courses. So in AP Computer Science A, students can then take that exam at the end of the year to earn 3 college credits. And then web development also connects to CTAG, where students can earn an additional 3 credits through that program. So that's kind of the overview. So Alex, I don't know, like the timing of how much more you want me to go into. I could share a few examples from class, or if we want to move on then to talk about the Southview program, I'll leave it to you to say where I should go here.
I think we're good on time. I think some examples would be fantastic if
Sure.
you wouldn't mind sharing some of those.
Yeah. All right, so here are just a few pictures then that I took off of my Twitter account that I share things out. So this is something that we just did in the senior level course. I was really excited about this program. A former teacher at Northview that's now working with NASA in their aerospace program then reached out and said, hey, did you see this project? So it's something that we did with the senior students. So what they did was they took data of the lunar surface and they made a visualization out of it. So by using that data and then doing some graphical rendering, and they could change all these different settings, then it would enable somebody working with this app to kind of see how the terrain goes up and down. That's what the colors over here represent. Then another piece of it is that it would help a rover to find its correct path. So if it wanted to get from one point to another point, that then it would help it to find the ideal path so that it wouldn't tip over. So I just was very excited about this project that they made. It's a group project that they worked on together. So it was really neat to see them develop some of those soft skills that are really important. Certainly in both of our programs, we really want to teach students how to program and how to learn all of those concepts. But also very important are the soft skills like communication and working on a team, setting goals and setting deadlines and following through with those deadlines. What do they do when they come into a problem of some kind? And there certainly were lots of roadblocks that these students had when they worked on this pretty intense project. So I think that helped to wrap everything together. And that was just the start of this year. So I'm excited to see kind of where they go from there. And like I said, with the students, in the upper level program, then they lead up to a capstone project where they make a full-fledged application that then once it's hosted online, anybody could go to, if those permissions are set, and be able to use their app on, they could share that link with anybody and they could actually use their application. And it would be, on the order of Facebook.com, not obviously to that extent, but that's the kind of projects that they would be building. So then this was a picture from Intro to Computer Programming. So I said that we worked on doing the Space Invaders game in there. So you can see a shot of Gabby, one of the students, working on her code while we were still in class. So you had the aliens up there and then they move around. So kind of the way that I go through many of these tutorials is I do the tutorials to get the students started with the code, and then I'll mix in some challenges along the way. So once they have the basic pieces, then posing a challenge to change the number of aliens that are there, or change, instead of them moving just in the snake pattern, can they actually move in that step pattern like it does in the classical game? And then can they add in things like lasers? And once we've looked at something similar to that in a different project. This was an example from last year, so that's why the students don't have any masks on, and they're sitting closer together. They were working on making a web application, which we ended up using what they developed to help with the teacher in service. So the idea behind that app that they were developing was that there were sessions that teachers could sign up to attend. So then the teachers could go in and select which ones they wanted, and it would remember it. And then teachers could come back another time and change it. They could always come back later once the room numbers were finally available in the database. So this shows an example then of the web applications that the senior students work on, and that the junior students are working through similar projects, I'd say, to the Space Invaders game. They're usually making a lot of video games. We do the life simulation is always a pretty interesting one, where we spawn little creatures and we program the rules for how those creatures move around, and just see how they interact by setting those different rules and letting things just happen randomly almost. That's always a fun one in the junior level. And they do the same thing at the end of each semester. They make then their own project that they just get to pick whatever topic it is, and they develop it. Now, this is an example from one of the first couple weeks in Intro to Computer Programming, just teaching students the basics of using different functions to perform different tasks, like drawing a triangle, and having things in a certain order, and getting used to what these numbers do to make it show up in a different location. So I was pretty impressed by that just in the first couple weeks of Intro. And then another example of working with video games, because I've tried two different varieties where we work with the console-based stuff where it's all text-based, which is still valuable in this day and age. And so that serves a lot of purpose. And then also adding in the graphical stuff where the students can see what their code does immediately. And especially in the lower levels, I found that to be pretty neat to work with. And then this is a screenshot from 2D game design. This is what that game salad piece of software looks like. So, that's for most students over at Northview, the 2D game design course and Game Salad is probably their first step into doing programming and coding. It's not really involving writing code, but they're starting to get those concepts of how objects interact with each other, and looping and setting conditions for if they have eaten 3 candies and they cross the finish line, then they win. They start to build those ideas of analytic and computational thinking and problem solving, because when they try to do those challenges, it doesn't work at first, and they just keep trying and trying, and that experimentation process is really important for them to develop. And I say to students over and over, and I'm sure this is true with Mr. Jones's program as well, and in most of the Careertech programs, is that maybe the most important thing they walk away with, at least that everybody walks away with, is problem-solving skills, and having the skills to approach something that they didn't know how to do before, working through it, and then realizing that yes, they can do something new. So that is kind of the big overview of the different courses. Another thing that we have in the program is we also participate in Business Professionals of America. So those are different competitions that students can do. And we, along with some of the business competitions that happen, programming is part of that too. So it's a good network for us to be a part of, because they've had lots of experience with doing those. So these, in this year and last year, it's more virtual. It looks a little different, but normally we go to a university and then for the state level, go down to Columbus in a big conference, and then going to the national level. Those are all very neat experiences, but it's just a different chance for students to apply their programming skills and to do those in a competitive setting. And there's several team events too that they can work on. Right now I have students working on the software engineering team and the web application team and the website design team. So those are very neat experiences for those students to work in a smaller team of about 4 students, but to go through that process of communicating with each other, setting goals together, dealing with conflict. There's still drama, and that's all good things for them to work on to develop real life skills. And then in the end, they walk away with a really cool video game and a really cool app that they made. I believe the topic for web app this year is a reservation system for a theme park. So you could think going to Cedar Point and wanting to keep people socially distanced, so you're trying to have times set aside for people to go there. So then a user could go in and select, I want to ride the dragster at this time, and seeing if it's available, and doing the same for restaurants and for the theater shows that they have. And it's all saved based on somebody's login, just like any full-scale application that you all have interacted with on the internet. That's the kind of program that they're making. So yeah, I think I covered all the pieces I definitely wanted to hit. So I'd at whatever point be happy to answer questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Ward. Yeah, so John has finished going through what he offers in Northview Computer Programming. Does anyone have a question for Mr. Ward? Okay. All right. Well, I don't see anything in the chat. Oh, there we go. Looks like we've got one question. Can't see your entire name. Carrie is the first name that I see. So go ahead and unmute yourself and ask Mr. Ward your question.
I see a familiar face. 2, actually.
Hi. Good explanation of the junior and senior years. Amy, as you know, is taking both those classes her freshman year. What do you have available sophomore year?
So really, those are the, in the freshman and sophomore years, it's just introduction to computer programming and then 2D game design. That's what we have. Each of those being half-semester courses. Are
there any classes for her to take next year?
There wouldn't be anything in addition to that, no.
Not particularly just for feeding into computer programming, but there might be some aligned ones. Tammy Blue, one of our teachers at Northview, teaches a Careertech program called Interactive Media. And as part of feeding in the interactive media, she teaches a semester course called Computer Graphic Design. A different sort of thing. However, CGD, as we call it, Computer Graphic Design, definitely keeps students in computers with high-powered industry standard software. But that one is more about graphic design than it is about programming or game design. Still, it would keep the students in the same sort of area working with computers. But one of the problems that we have is that Mr. Word is occupied for 4 out of his 6 periods of teaching per day with his junior senior program classes. So it leaves only 2 periods a day left over for him to handle the feeder classes. And that's why we only have 2 that we offer, particularly feeding into programming. But since we have other career tech teachers, Mrs. Blue's Computer Graphic Design, and she also teaches one called Today's Technology, which is more of a survey of technology apps and such that students might find helpful both for high school and for college. So those are definitely a couple opportunities. They'll be listed in the program of study, which is being updated on the Northview and Southview websites very soon. If Mr. Jones, I don't know if you've updated the Southview one yet, but that should be updated momentarily. And so, yep, okay, good. So I think we have updated programs of study on both sites. You open that program of study and take a look at those courses. You'll see that John's not the only person teaching a tech-associated feeder course. that can be taken. But I would look for Mrs. Blue's courses, computer graphic design or today's technology as good options for sophomore year.
Actually, I'm taking both of those classes from Miss Blue. Just next semester. No, wait. I'm taking visual technology right now, currently, and then I'm going to take today's technology and 2D game design next semester.
Wow, you just jumped right out of the gate and got into as many tech classes as you could, didn't you? That's fantastic. So unfortunately, you might have run, if you've taken 2D game design, intro to computer programming, visual technology is the same course as computer graphic design. There's no difference between those two. And you're taking today's technology. I'm racking my brain right now. The only other courses that you could take that would be computer aligned would be those in our engineering department. And those courses would be courses like engineering design, engineering applications, 3D modeling and prototyping. That might be something you might want to get into. Again, we're on the spectrum of STEM and technology, and we've got computer programming over here and more engineering over here. Our engineering programs are often focused on robotics, aerospace, those sorts of things, but they have feeder programs too. And so 3D modeling and prototyping might be one that you want to look into. And you might even think about engineering design or engineering applications as being a strong tech focus with actual computer software interactions. So we still have some more for you.
Are there feeder classes at Southview that are different that she could take next year?
Yes. So, and this is an excellent question. I'm glad you're bringing this up. Our program classes, junior, senior program classes, those are open to any student in the district. You're a Northview student, you want to take Mr. Jones' programming program, you can do that. You're a Southview student, you want to take Mr. Ward's, you can do that. It's more difficult for us to get a Southview student to take a Northview feeder or a Northview student to take a Southview feeder. They're mostly the same, however, there are some differences. Like, since we have a visual communication design program over at Southview, that means there's a 3D game design feeder course that is only available at Southview right now. We have 3D Game Design 1 and 3D Game Design 2 is just being phased in. They have 2D Game Design. They've got Intro to Computer Programming over there, just the same as everything else. Also, John, I don't believe you have AP Computer Science Principles over at Northview yet, right?
That's correct. No, we don't have that.
Okay, so that's one that Southview has, AP Computer Science Principles, that Mr. Jones teaches. So there are some differences. There's a lot of overlap. Mostly it's overlap. But there are some differences based upon the different personnel we have in the buildings. So unfortunately, if you were really eager to take something like AP Computer Science Principles, you'd have to talk to your counselor about that, see if that might work out. There would need to be transportation involved, which is possible. And we have done this in cases. It's not common. It's very common for a junior or senior to travel for a career tech program. Happens all the time. However, for a feeder class, it's less common. But still, you can talk to your guidance counselor about it when it comes to scheduling and see if there's any possibility that that could happen. We would never want to do anything to stop you from taking advantage of every tech associated course in Sylvania Schools that you could take advantage of. And we'll do what we can to make that happen. But I'm really excited that you're going through as many as you are.
I remember going to like at Southview to see all their classes and stuff, and there was one of the like visual technology, like graphic design kind of classes. I don't like really remember, but it was like kind of like making like logos and stuff.
Yeah, that was visual communication design. And that's the one that goes between graphic arts and game design. So that's the one where you'd learn not only software that would do graphic arts, and we're talking about logos, not just logos, but like 3D animated logos, those sorts of things for like television production and such. But we're also talking about using the Unreal Engine and other industry standard software to develop 3D environments for games and other sorts of things. So that's a program that we handle at Southview. Actually, we had that open house last night with Mr. Eschador, and the recording of that open house will be shared with everybody. I'm going to update everyone at the end of this week with the open houses that we've had recently, trades, computer programming, and digital media. So you can go ahead and check out that session as well.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the information.
Yeah, lots of opportunities. It gets me excited just talking about them. So we got a question from Louise Ha in the chat. And the first question, John, I think you can handle. Must the student take the Intro to Computer Programming by sophomore year to complete the computer programming track? I believe you addressed that a little bit in your presentation, but if you could reiterate the answer to that one.
Yeah, sure. So no, it's not a prerequisite for the upper level courses. So it's okay if the student has not taken it. So in the beginning of the junior level program, we do start from the beginning because in the introduction to computer programming, we're very focused on JavaScript. We do switch over to Java, and the style of programming that we do is different, and the depth that we go into is different. So we actually do start from the very beginning. And right now, the juniors that I have, probably only half of them took Intro to Computer Programming, and the rest of them are doing fine. So yeah, it's not a requirement. It's okay.
And an associated question there was, can you register for Intro to Computer Programming in spring at this time? That is possible, but it's not guaranteed. So what would happen is the student would want to talk to the counselor to see if computer programming, Intro to Computer Programming, is running in a period that the student has available in their schedule, and if there's a seat available. If all of those pieces align, then yes, a student can add a second semester course at this time. Got to be a conversation with the counselor. They're the ones that have all of the control over the schedule. So please feel free to reach out to a counselor and say, hey, is there an Intro to Computer Programming section? Is it possible it can fit into my schedule? Is there a seat? Can I get in? I would encourage you to ask that question because it's possible the answer is no, we can't fit it. We'd have to move this, this, and this, and it's just not going to work. But it's very possible that it might work. So check that out and ask the counselor. And then the last question there was, how can a Southview student take a Northview class? For our junior senior programs, we run transfer buses all day long. So a student doesn't sacrifice much of their day to transfer from one. In fact, often it's lunch, which they have a split lunch / travel period. So they're not actually sacrificing a period. Or they start their day. Like if somebody wanted to take Mr. Word's computer programming, they were a Southview student, they would show up at Northview in the morning for first and second period, and then they'd spend third period traveling. They would lose one period of their day in travel. And so we make that pretty easy for students to transfer between the two schools because we want the opportunities for everybody.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we move to Mr. Jones? Mr. Ward, thank you very much again. I also have the pleasure of introducing Byron Jones, who is our teacher of computer programming at Southview High School. And I'm equally as excited to extol Mr. Jones' skills as a computer programming teacher. Some of the most exciting stuff that I did as a Southview administrator when I was assistant principal was working with Mr. Jones and his students doing mobile app development and then presenting them to actual industry, I'm blanking on the noun, but industry professionals, there we go, in the local area so that they could give feedback to the students in a very business-like atmosphere. They would present and almost kind of pitch and sell their mobile app. And then you've got people that own software companies, actual industry professionals there that are giving feedback to these students. Did that a couple years in a row. Very exciting opportunities. It's just one of the many things that Mr. Jones does in his program. So without further ado, I'll turn things over to Mr. Jones. It's all yours. Take it away.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Very excited to have this many people showing up tonight with the virtual environment. I'm glad you're here. I'm going to go ahead and present a screen as well. So there is some definite overlap as Mr. Word was talking about. So I'm going to not focus on those things that are the same, give a quick brief overview of what we have there at Southview with programming, but then I'll focus on where they're different, and so how Southview difference there. So at Southview, we do have 2D game design. We have an introduction to programming as well. We also have AP Computer Science Principles, which was mentioned just a moment ago, and then we have the Careertech program, which is for the juniors and the seniors. With 2D game design, Mr. Ward did a great job. I was talking about it. It's 1 period a day. It's 1 semester. I actually recommend this one for the first one if you're interested in getting involved in programming. It's a great place to start off. A lot of drag and drop style block type of programming, so you don't have to memorize a lot of code. Students can see the results really quick, so I think that's a great one to start. That's offered at both. Intro to programming. I have talked with Mr. Word about this one, and they are similar. We are using JavaScript and Intro to Programming at Southview as well. It's also 1 period, 1 semester. The way I teach it at Southview, I do have the first quarter. It's 1 semester. The first quarter is a very similar block style programming to where they're dragging and dropping blocks of code to learn the programming logic. And then the second half of the course is the more text-based. So it's really a natural progression as they take something like 2D game design, where they're doing more of the drag and drop style of programming, and then going into Intro to Programming. In the first quarter, you're very similar, where you're able to drag blocks of code around as they're going through it. And then the second half of that class, where they're more text-based, which is leading towards the other programming classes that we offer. AP Computer Science Principles. This one is 1 period a day, but it is a full year course. It's the equivalent of a college Introduction to Computer Science course, and developed through the AP College Board. It has 5 what they call big ideas. And that's what the whole course is centered around, which is creative development, which a lot of people don't consider programming as a creative avenue, which it really is. So I'm really excited that they added that as one of their big ideas. But data is huge in our environment, and companies all over the world use data on a daily, if not hourly basis to make huge decisions. So we focus on that. Of course, programming is also a part of that class. So we do cover basics in programming and popular algorithms, computer systems, networks. We talk about what is the internet? Why does the internet work? Things like that are covered in the class. How can there be safety and redundancy in networks so you don't lose connection if just one line goes down, there's a bad storm or something? How does the internet always work, even though you might lose power? How is it still working somewhere else? So we go through those sorts of things, but also it covers the impact of computing on society. And we can have some really deep conversations there on how different technological advancements are changing culture and what goes on in that avenue. So that's a pretty exciting part of the class as well. So those are the 3 what I would say feeder courses, or the courses that you can take typically freshman and sophomore year. My suggestion for Southview students would be start off freshman year, semester 1 in 2D game design, and then move to Intro to Programming for the second half of freshman year. Then sophomore, we have the year-long AP Computer Science Principles, and then that would lead towards the Computer Programming Careertech program for the junior and the senior year. Talking about the Careertech program, there is, especially in the first year, overlap with what Mr. Word was talking about with his program as well. It is two years, 2 periods a day. And yes, it's honors and above as far as the level that we're talking about. So there's 1 honors class, 1 AP class, and then 2 college CCP classes as well. A student has the ability at Southview to earn up to 10 hours of college credit going through this program. Now, we do focus on the Java language the junior year, and desktop, laptop type of app development, it's very similar to what they're doing at Northview, covering the basics of programming and using the Java language. Also preparing for the AP exam for AP Computer Science, AP Computer Science A. So we have that part in common, but the main goal at Southview for the overall 2-year program is mobile app development. So at Northview, when you're learning about the web development and database and how that works together, our main focus is on mobile app development. The goal is by the time you leave me, that you're able to create from scratch a app for both an Android device, whether it's a tablet or a phone, or an Apple device, so if you have an iPhone or an iPad. So You're learning both operating systems and able to make something from start to finish. And that was why I really feel that it was exciting when they added the creative part to the AP Computer Science Principles, because really it's a creative thing to make your own app. You get an idea and you can make that from start to finish. So that part is really exciting for me. Students really enjoy getting to come in and say, hey, I've got this really good idea for an app. They spend so much time on their phones. I know you see that. You have to. We see that too. That's why we had to be very strict with rules at school, because the phones were invading our classrooms so much. But they spend so much time on their phone. The mobile app development really just connects with them, because they know what they like and don't like as they're using all the different apps. And like, ooh, if they would just do this, it would make my app so much better. And I'll look at them and say, well, why don't you make one? And they can come up with a creative idea and actually make their own app. Now, the way the class is designed, they do not have to have a smartphone or a tablet to take the class. We do have simulators on the computers that they can use to test their apps. However, if they want to, and of course, if you give them permission to, they can actually install the apps they make in class on their devices. So that would be between you and them, whether you allow that. But they can actually create a mobile app and actually upload it to their phone and have their app on their phone to show others. We do have students that have made apps, and they've already told me they have plans of creating their own app store accounts and starting to sell their apps online. So that's a possibility as well. Mr. Word also talked about BPA. So we're definitely heavily involved in BPA, Business Professionals of America, and the different competitions they offer at Southview as well. We have been competing for 4 years now. So in the past 4 years, we've actually had 4 teams make it to the top 10 in the nation for software engineering. So 4 teams in 4 years, I feel that's a pretty good record. The problem is, that each class is now going to feel that pressure. The longer we keep up that streak, I know the students are going to feel that pressure, like, hey, we've got to get into the top 10 as well. But it's pretty exciting. So I've got some pictures here. Like, this was our very first team, very first time we competed 4 years ago, and they're a software engineering team from Southview and got first place. And I was like, well, that's a great way to start. And I've got several other pictures here of winners at both state and national levels as they're competing. But I feel that BPA gives them a chance to really be creative outside of the class environment, because in those competitions, they're on their own. They're working on that. We're not really doing that in class. I might give them a little bit of advice or suggestions in the beginning before they get started, but then they go and create their own things, and they get to do that on their own, working together with their teammates for the team events, which is pretty exciting as well. So overall, there are similarities. Like, we have some of the same intro classes, and the 2D game design, I know he mentioned it. I definitely recommend those if you're incoming freshman, or if you're a freshman or sophomore and haven't taken it yet. I think that's a great place to start with programming at Northview or Southview. But also, we have the intro to programming and the AP class as well. If you're a sophomore getting ready, check out one of our Careertech programs. That's 2 years, and you can get a lot of great information that can help you with a career that can be very lucrative. The average salary, I looked it up last year, the average salary of a software developer was in the 95 to over 100,000 range. And that's the average salary. So we're talking about high paying jobs in this market. So I'm really excited to be teaching programming here at Southview, and I enjoy it. Students are normally really enjoying it as well. But that's all I have. I don't want to repeat stuff that he's already told you. So if you do have questions for me, though, I'll be happy to answer those.
Mr. Jones, thank you very much. Once again, we'll go ahead and open the floor to questions if anybody has. Stuart Hyatt, go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I'm a freshman this year, and I was just wondering if it would be too difficult or stressing on me if I wanted to take the other two of because I'm taking 2D game design next semester.
Okay.
And I was wondering if it would be too stressful to take the other 2 classes, not the 2-year program, but the other 2 classes next year at the same time.
No, I actually don't think it would be. I've had several students overlap and take 2 classes in the same semester. that's possible. One of the classes would be a year-long class, and the other class would be a one-semester class. So that is definitely a possibility.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Excellent question. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Jones? Oh, looks like we have another hand. Jason Ellis, go for it.
Sorry about that.
Sure.
Thanks for this. This is fantastic, and we appreciate all this information. We'd be a transfer student from Ottawa Hills. Are the prerequisites addressed for transfer students? Like, is the program set up between the schools where prerequisites for standard classes are met, and also being able to participate in these programs at your facility?
There are no prerequisites for the 2-year program, so there wouldn't be anything that you'd be missing needing. So that would be just fine. We've never had any sort of challenges with Ottawa Hills students. And just for everybody in the room, we are in a compact with Ottawa Hills, and we are proud to have Ottawa Hills students join us for Careertech programs. And that always works really seamlessly. The counseling staff at Ottawa Hills High School does an excellent job of making sure that the students remain on track for graduation, that they're still taking their classes that are required at the high school in their home district, as well as having the opportunity to be transported over to Southview or Northview High School for their Careertech program. But our programming courses, no prereq required. So your son or daughter should be just fine.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Any further questions? This is excellent. Most questions I've had of any one of these yet. Looks like I can't see. Sean McPheron, go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. My son Michael, he's currently at Timberstone, and he's in algebra and Spanish 1. And I really want to get him in this program for the 2-year 11th and 12th grade years. But he's also involved in band, and he's also probably going to take 4 years of science. Do those will that be too much of an overload on his schedule?
Byron, I would imagine you have some band students in your program right now.
I would be happy to answer that one. Absolutely. I have band students taking programming junior and senior year every year. It's been very exciting because I've had a regular flow of students taking band, also students taking upper level sciences as well. When you have a student that is in band, a Careertech program, and an upper level science, at that point it gets more difficult to make sure they all don't overlap. But it is still possible. I actually have a student doing that this year. So I do know it's possible. In the, I would say, worst case scenario that I've seen, a student have had what they call a band lunch, where the band director actually gives them maybe 15, 20 minutes at the beginning of one of the band periods to eat. And so they wouldn't have a full lunch period. But that is someone that's taking like a lab science, band, and a 2-period Careertech program. But even then, it is still possible.
Yeah, and if I could just add in there too, a similar situation at Northview, we do accommodate for students that are trying to do lots of different electives like band and orchestra. One year I even had a student that was in both band and orchestra. So they definitely did not have a lunch. They were doing that band lunch. But we, I had a spare room in the back, so if they ever needed to, not clog up the computer keyboards, but yeah, they could finish their lunch if they needed to. And also accommodating students taking advanced science and math. And we even have some of those students, if it's necessary, then one of the double block periods can be in more of a flexible schedule. So like sometimes students have, it's called a dovetail schedule, where they're only in the chemistry during second period on Monday and Wednesday, and then every other Friday. So we can make accommodations with that, and even if we need to reschedule and have the student in an independent study for one period, we make those accommodations. That I can speak for Northview at least. So yeah, it's definitely something that we try to make sure that any student who wants to take these programs can take it.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Byron. My former position at Southview managed the schedule, so I had to deal with questions like this quite often. And both Byron and John are absolutely correct. The name of the game is accommodation. We want to accommodate students to take every class that they are interested in taking. We would love students to be in advanced sciences, career tech, and music at the same time, and we'll do everything we can to make that possible. Now, I will say, it is not always possible 100% of the time, but almost all the time we're able to make that work. If you do the math, science takes 2 periods if you've got a lab class. John's right, it's an alternating second period, so sometimes there's some flexibility there. Career tech takes 2 periods, and then band generally takes 2 periods. So that's 6 out of a 9-period day. You probably have 2 other required classes that you have to take, and being in English and a math. And then in your senior year, you would have a required government to take 2. So senior year gets packed pretty full, where you would need a band lunch or some other kind of accommodation. But we shoehorn things in, we get it done, and our teachers are hugely flexible with the options that Mr. Ward was just referring to. So yeah, it's really exciting to think about the students taking all of those opportunities. And sometimes I am humbled thinking about myself as a senior and how little I did, and how much our students do. So it's good to see that happen. Any other questions for Mr. Word or Mr. Jones, or anything that I can answer? Antonio, is the Northview program involved with the BPA competition as well? Yep. Both Mr. Word and Mr. Jones work with BPA, and the competition is there and lively for both programs. Any other questions? All right, you're welcome. Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Jones and Mr. Word for being here tonight, for spending their time. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out. Whatever that means now, everything's in quotation marks when we talk about meeting. But joining us this evening for our informational session. I hesitate to call it an open house, but really when we're back in session, we're hoping that parent meetings like this, we'd like to make a tradition of parents actually coming in and seeing our lab spaces. Unfortunately, we can't do that this time, but we've enjoyed answering your questions and having some time to spend with you. Our email addresses are really easy. So Mr. Word is jword@sylvaniaschools.org. Mr. Jones is bjones@sylvaniaschools.org, and I am a.clarkson@sylvaniaschools.org. If you have questions for us, please feel free to ask. We'd be happy to continue the conversation. And don't forget, talking with counselors is always a good way to get a handle on the schedule and what's possible. So until those questions come, I will bid everyone good evening. Thank you very much. Be safe, and I wish the best for you and your families.